let's optimize our codex. Now, what do I mean by optimize? If we look here in the event construct, this is being called every time our codex comes onto the screen. And what we do is we start a dialog every single time just to find out what the button should be called, which is really not optimal. A, because we're creating 100 new dialogues every single time, and B, because we're not doing anything with it. All we're doing is looking to see what we're doing with it, what the text is going to be. So what I want to do is get rid of all of this. So let's just delete all that. And our event construct is just going to... Actually, I don't think it's going to do anything now. Let's just delete this. No, wait, it actually is going to do something. Sorry about that. Construct. There is one thing it's going to do. Also, whenever we click on a button, when we over here in show codex details called by codex button, we're also starting a new dialog here, and that's also very not optimal. So because the only time we want to start a dialog is when we need to update the codex details, the text in it, and if the text isn't changing, there's no point in creating a new dialog every single time. So let's also get rid of these. And as a matter of fact, we're also going to get rid of this function, but we're going to keep some of it around. For example, we want to keep the branch over here to see if, well, actually, basically we're going to get rid of that and the choose details, and we're not going to call it itself again because it no longer exists, basically. I'm also going to get rid of this over here and the to target text because that's going to be done by the button. So what I want to do instead of doing all this stuff is have our codex button just store whatever the codex details is. So for example, the name of the button, obviously it's just going to be whatever this text block is, instead of having to calculate that every single time. And for the codex details, we can just store an array of strings, or not strings, text in here, and just pass that into our codex to update its details instead of having to start a new dialog every time we click on it. So let's do that. We're going to create a new variable. This is going to be an array of text, which as I already said over here, this is going to be called codex details. Sure. And in the codex details, or how we're going to work with our codex details is we're going to make a new event. This event is going to be called update codex details. And when we update the codex details, this is when we're going to create our new dialog instance. So let's get our codex entry and start dialog, passing in the get game instance, cast to vn game instance, convert to pure, and get dialog widget, and get participants. Like so. And the performance right now is horrible for some reason. What is going on? Okay, well hopefully it keeps at 100. I updated my drivers and all of a sudden it randomly gets slow. After we start the dialog, we're going to get the active node text, set our text blocks, set text, and then we're going to do that recursive function again where we go through, where we keep choosing option 0 until we eventually hit an end node. So let's create a new event. We're going to call this add to codex details. And we're going to, well, first we need to tell our codex details to empty itself, so clear. Otherwise it'll just keep adding to whatever we had before, which is not good. And after that we're going to call the add to codex details, which is going to take in a codex, sorry, not codex, dialog, dog context? DOG context. And we're going to pass in whatever we got from the start dialog over here. So in this add to codex details, all we're going to do is choose option 0, choose child 0, branch on that. And on the false, we don't need to do anything because we're not directly affecting our codex this time. And we're also not going to, well, in the codex when it was false, we had to modify our existing codex, we had to hide our unused widgets, but we're not going to be doing this because, well, we're only affecting our buttons details right now. So let's get our true, and we're going to add to our codex details. So get codex details, add, and what we're adding is the active node text to target text, passing that into our add. Okay. And after that, make sure you don't forget to do this, otherwise that's not a recursive function. We need to add to codex details once more. Why is this called new param? What if I compile it? There it is, okay. Sorry, it was just really bothering me that it was called new param for some reason. Let's compile and save this, and now we need to actually call this function, update codex details. And where we're going to do that is in our dialog here. Whenever we would add a flag to our triggered flags, instead we're going to do a modify name whenever we're adding a flag that modifies a codex entry. So instead of doing an event type, we're going to do modify name, and the name of it is going to be whatever your codex details over here is going to be. So for this case, it's going to be cdx pot. Make sure you spell it correctly with no spaces or anything. So cdx underscore pot. Spell it exactly the way it is in the editor. And the value name is going to be whatever we used to pass in. So in this case, it would be pot. Over here, it would be modify name cdx pot. Over here, it would be pot info, and down here it would be modify name cdx pot broken. And in our game instances modify name, we're still going to keep this on dialog event for the triggered flags in case you're doing a flag that doesn't affect your codex. So if it's just like a story thing you want to trigger a flag for and it doesn't affect any codexes whatsoever, we're still going to keep this around. But for the modify name value, we're going to check to see if it was a codex event we're doing. So in the name value, we're going to do toString. That way we can check to see if it starts with cdx underscore. cdx, of course, standing for codex. We're going to branch. So this branch is going to check to see if when we call this function, if we're updating our codex info. And if we are, we're going to check to see if our name value is already in our triggered flags. So get triggered flags contains item name value over here. We're going to branch, because we don't want this to be updating every time if our triggered flags already has it. If this has already been called for that particular name value, we don't want this to update the details every time, because it would spawn a new codex object reference. Back in our game instance, we're going to say if it's false, meaning it doesn't contain it, then we are going to add it to our triggered flags. And there's no need to use add unique because we already checked to see if it's in here. And after that, we need to tell our codex button to call this function. So let's keep a reference to all of our codex buttons back in our codex. When we create our codex buttons, we're going to add it to a new map whose key is name and whose value is w underscore codex button. So I'm going to call this codex buttons. And we're going to use this to really quickly find our buttons. So get codex buttons. and add the button we created over here, create codex button. And for the name value, it's going to be the what we got off here in the for each loop. We can just break this, passing in the primary asset name. And I'm going to hit the hide uncommented pins, or hide unconnected pins, to get rid of the other one that we're not using. And then back in our game instance, we can say get our menu widget, get codex. You could also, of course, just make a new variable for your codex and add it in your event graph when you create your widgets, but I'm going to do that off, not stream, but when I'm not recording. And we're going to get the codex buttons, and we're going to find whatever it is you passed in here for the value name. And this button is going to update codex details after we add the flag to our triggered flags. And just because I'm assuming you want to tell your player that the codex has been updated, I'm going to get our dialog widget and say notify. And for the notified text, let's just what was it? Format text, that's what it is. With the format text, you can pass stuff into a text and sort of do a append with strings, sort of, except it's slightly different. To add an input to our format text, we can use the curly brackets. I'm going to call this, and in between it, we can name it something. Let's do codex name, sure. And to the right of that, I'm going to say details were updated, exclamation point. Or let's just say updated. Yeah. And now you see we have a pin for our codex name, and we can just pass in our codex button, get text, title text, that's what it is, and get text, passing this into our codex name. Compile, save, and let's actually get the details onto our screen now. So in the codex, when we show our codex details, instead of getting a codex entry, I want to get an array of text. Actually, I need to get a text first. This is going to be the codex name. And then I want an array of text. This is going to be our codex details. This is going to be an array. Back in our button, this isn't going to be valid anymore, so let's delete this and pass in our codex, our text block, zeros, get text into the codex name, and we're going to pass in our codex details into this text array, codex details. And why is this called text block 0? Where, back in my game instance, w_codex, oh, sorry, not codex, the find value off here. This is our button, so this button we're going to get text, block 0, and get text into our codex name. Sorry about that, that was my bad. Back to our not button, back into our codex. This function is now being called whenever we click on a button, and what we'll do is get our title text and set the text to be the codex name. And after that, we want to do a for each loop for this codex detail. So for each, we're basically going to do this stuff. So hold on, hide unused. Okay, so this is in the complete. We want to hide everything, all the unused ones after that. I don't remember what this branch is for. This is where we check to see if we create a new child or not. So let's get our array index and pass that into our greater or equal to node here. Pass this into our branch and that should be fine. Alright, and for the first index, we want our codex details length. Like that. Let's test this and hope it worked. Compile, save, and it didn't even compile. Oh yes, we need the in-text. My bad. Let's just pass this into our in-text. Alright, let's see if this works. Press start. Pot updated, because that was the very first line. If we go to the Codex, we can see now, these are showing up as text block because I forgot to, after we create the button, we need to tell it to update the, update codex details as well. Press play again, start codex. Now we have a bunch of question marks with a pot. Go to our pot, it's a pot, go back. What do you want to do with it? Inspect it, pot updated, once again. Go to our codex, go to our pot, a brown clay pot. Alright, go back and we break it, pot updated, go to our codex, pot. Sadly it was broken, never to be usable again. Great. Now you'll notice that when we hit, let's say play, go to our start, go to our codex, for pot, go back, and we inspect it, and if we go to our codex, right now we're still on pot, but it just says a pot instead of a brown clay pot. So let's fix that. When we construct our on-event construct, what we want to do is just call the show codex details again for our whatever the last button we clicked on is, so whatever our current codex thing is. So let's just do let's make a new variable. This is going to be our last clicked button, and this is no longer going to be a map, it's just going to be a single variable, and that variable type is going to be codex button. Compile, save, and now whenever we show our codex details, or called by, yeah, this is going to be what's called by our button. So I suppose we actually do need to just send in our button, don't we? Let's add a new parameter for our button. Like so. Oh, and it's not an array. It's going to be a single variable. And let's just set our last clicked button to be that. Okay. And then in the event construct, we want to call this function show codex details. So let's copy this, or sorry, not copy. We'll just show codex details. Oh, we only want to do this if our last click button is valid, because at the very start of the game, when we or the very first time we hit codex, this is going to be null. We are not going to have a last click button because we'd never clicked the last button. So let's get this and ask if it is valid. Choose the second one for the one with the execution pins. And then if this is valid, we're going to call this. Passing in the get text block 0, get text, and getting its get codex, sorry, get codex details. Let's try this one more time. Compile, save, and play. Go to start, go to our codex, choose pot, back, and inspect it. Go to our codex, and it did not work. Why is that? Last click details is valid. Hold on, let me just debug this really quick. This is being called, it's not valid, so we hit pot, go back, go to our codex again. This is still not being valid, because our last click button is not valid ever, for some reason, even though we set it here in the show codex details. Oh, because we never pass it in. My bad. Back in our Codex button, when we click on it, we need to pass in self. One last time. Alright. Pot. It says a pot. Inspect it. It now says a brown clay pot. It automatically updated it for us. Great. Alright. I think that'll do it for optimizing our codex. Now we are no longer creating multiple objects every time we bring our codex into screen. We're just updating our details. And the only time we're creating our objects is, well, when we create the... Where is it actually? Oh, this is our codex button. When we actually spawn the codex button, because it's calling the update codex details, and the only time this is being called is when we're actually updating our details. And this is the only time we're starting a new dialog for our codex, I believe. So yeah, that should do it for optimizing our codex.